It all began like any other ordinary day, or at least that's what I wanted to believe. The sun was peeking through the curtains, casting shadows across our room, and I could hear the faint hum of the world waking up outside. I lay there in our king-sized bed, my mind wandering to thoughts of Rachel, my wife of 10 years. To anyone on the outside, we were the picture of a perfect couple, successful careers, a beautiful home, a seemingly unbreakable bond. I worked as a software developer, buried in code and deadlines, while Rachel ran her own interior design business. She had a sharp eye for detail, a creative soul that breathed life into every room she touched. She was the star. I was just the man who stood by her side. But things had been different lately. We weren't the same people who once spent lazy Sundays in bed, laughing at nothing, talking about everything. Our relationship had become a series of fleeting conversations, quick kisses, and the sound of her heels clicking out the door. She'd been distant, distracted even. I told myself it was just a phase, a rough patch. Every marriage has them, right? Rachel had always been beautiful, the kind of woman who turned heads without even trying. Her wavy auburn hair, the way her green eyes sparkled when she was happy. She could have had anyone, but she chose me. I was always the lucky one, and I knew it. But recently, she had seemed more radiant, more alive, and there were times when I would catch her looking at her phone with a sly smile, a smile that wasn't meant for me. One evening, a few weeks ago, I noticed her leaving the house in a hurry. She had claimed it was a business meeting, but the way she dressed, tight black dress, her lips painted a deep, seductive red, felt far too intimate for a simple client consultation. I wanted to ask more, but something inside me held back, maybe out of fear or some naive hope that things were still all right. Our conversations had become guarded, careful. She was always quick to change the subject whenever I mentioned her recent late nights. Just a new project, a big client, she would say, flashing that perfect smile. But behind that smile, I saw something I hadn't seen before, a hint of guilt, perhaps, or maybe even excitement. I tried to shake it off, but the seed of doubt had been planted. At night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling while she slept beside me. I wondered if I was imagining it, if my insecurities were getting the best of me. She was everything to me, my best friend, my partner in crime. We had built a life together, one filled with dreams and plans. I didn't want to believe she was hiding something, but the clues were there, small, almost insignificant, but they gnawed at me like a rat in the walls. Then there was the cruise. It was meant to be a week-long break, a chance for her to unwind. She told me it was a girls' trip, a chance to catch up with her old college friends. I was supposed to go, but work commitments got in the way. I trusted her. I trusted that she needed this, that she deserved this. But when she left, there was something in the way she kissed me goodbye, a lingering hesitation that felt like a whisper of goodbye. And that brings me back to today. As I got out of bed and shuffled to the kitchen, I noticed a note on the table, sitting atop a small black bag filled with her laundry. I frowned, thinking she must have forgotten to take it with her. Beside it was a small flash drive and a letter. I picked up the letter, my name written across the front in her neat handwriting. I opened it and started to read, and with every word, I felt my hands begin to tremble, my heart pounding in my chest like a drum. "Watch these videos carefully," she had written, "and you will understand that my lover is better than you in every way. He will be the father of my child, not you." I dropped the letter as if it burned me, my mind struggling to process the words, disbelief turning to anger. I picked up the flash drive, my fingers gripping it tightly, as if it held all the answers to the madness she had just unleashed into my life. I didn't know whether to scream or cry. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and something darker, something that started to form a storm inside of me. I didn't have much time to dwell on it before my phone rang, snapping me back to the cold, harsh reality. The screen displayed an unknown number, but the timing was too perfect to ignore. I answered, half expecting to hear Rachel's voice, maybe a cruel joke or a twisted explanation, but it wasn't her. "This is the police. We need to speak with you urgently," a voice on the other end said. And that's when everything started to unravel. I felt the phone slip in my sweaty palm, my heart rate still racing from the letter's brutal message. The police? Why would they be calling me now? I swallowed hard, trying to steady my voice as I responded. "Yes, this is Mark. What's this about?" "We need you to come down to the station," the officer replied, his tone stern but not unkind. "It's regarding your wife, Rachel." Rachel. I wanted to tell them she wasn't my wife anymore, at least not in any way that mattered. Not after what I had just read. My thoughts were tumbling over each other, my mind darting between the note, the cruise, and that damned flash drive sitting on the kitchen counter. Is she all right?" I asked, my voice barely more than a whisper. The officer hesitated before answering. "It's best if we discuss this in person." "Can you come right away?" "Yeah, I'm on my way," I muttered, more out of habit than any real decision. The call ended, and I stood there in the middle of the kitchen, staring at the phone like it might explode. I should have felt something. Fear, panic, confusion. But all I felt was this numbness, like I had been drained of any emotion other than the raw fury simmering beneath my skin. I grabbed my car keys and threw on a jacket, the flash drive still sitting there, a small, metallic specter on the counter. I didn't know if I should take it with me or leave it. It felt like a trap, a test I wasn't ready to face. I left it behind for now, making a mental note to deal with it later. The drive to the station was a blur. The world outside felt distant, muffled like I was moving through water. I thought back to all the times Rachel had said she loved me, how she laughed at my stupid jokes, how we danced in the living room to our favorite songs. It all seemed like a lie now, a beautiful, painful illusion that had shattered in an instant. I pulled into the parking lot of the police station and sat in the car for a moment, trying to collect my thoughts. What could this be about? Had something happened to her on the cruise? Was she in danger? Despite the fury coursing through me, a part of me still cared. A part of me still wanted to protect her, to fix whatever had gone wrong between us. But another part of me, a darker, more vengeful part, hoped she was suffering, just as I was now. Inside, the station was buzzing with the usual activity. Officers at their desks, people waiting to file reports, the low murmur of conversation blending with the occasional ringing phone. I approached the front desk, feeling like I was walking through a dream. "I'm here about Rachel Tanner," I said, my voice steady but cold. The officer at the desk glanced up, then nodded, recognizing my name. "Right, Mr. Tanner. Detective Harris will be with you shortly." I sat down in a chair near the window, my mind racing. I felt the sting of betrayal like 1,000 tiny cuts, each one deeper than the last. I thought back to the past few months, the strange moments that had piled up like clues in a mystery I hadn't wanted to solve. Rachel had been more secretive, more evasive than ever. Late nights at the office, sudden business trips, a new perfume that I hadn't bought her, and then the final insult, the cruise she claimed was with her girlfriends. I should have seen it then, should have known. But I was blinded by love, or maybe just plain stupidity. I didn't want to believe my wife could betray me like this. "Mr. Tanner," a voice broke through my thoughts, and I looked up to see a tall, middle-aged man with graying hair and sharp blue eyes standing before me. He extended a hand. "Detective Harris." I shook his hand, noticing the firm grip. "What's this about, Detective?" I asked, trying to sound composed. "We need to speak privately," he said, leading me to a small, windowless room with a single table and 2 chairs. The kind of room you see in movies, where secrets get spilled and lives are ruined. I sat down, and Harris took the seat opposite me, studying me for a moment before speaking. Your wife, Rachel, is reported missing. Her cruise ship docked this morning, but she wasn't on board. There are some concerning circumstances. I felt my stomach drop. Missing? A strange mix of relief and dread coursed through me. The rage I felt only moments ago was suddenly tempered with something else, a sense of impending doom. What do you mean, concerning? I asked. He slid a photo across the table. It was Rachel, standing on the deck of the cruise ship, her arms around another man. I recognized him instantly from the few occasions she'd mentioned him, a supposed client, a man named Eric. Tall, athletic, with a square jaw and a smug smile. It was all coming together now. The late nights, the secrecy, this was him. Harris continued, That's Eric Lambert, your wife's companion on this trip. He's also missing. We found her belongings in her cabin, but no trace of either of them. There were signs of a struggle. A struggle? My mind was spinning. The fury I felt was mingled with confusion. What kind of signs? Blood, Harris replied bluntly. A lot of it. And just like that, I felt the room spin, my world collapsing around me. I had no idea what was happening, but I knew this was just the beginning. I sat there, the word blood echoing in my mind, bouncing off the walls like a bullet ricocheting around the room. My thoughts were a chaotic mess, images of Rachel and that smug bastard, Eric, swirling together, mixing with the sight of blood on white sheets, a crime scene on the high seas. I had imagined a million scenarios in my head, but this was beyond anything I could have conceived. Mr. Tanner, Detective Harris continued, his voice cutting through the fog in my brain, do you know why your wife would have been with this man? I glanced up at him, my mouth dry. I could still feel the sting of her letter burning against my memory. I didn't owe her any more loyalty. Not now. Not ever. He's her lover, I said flatly, my voice sounding distant, almost like it belonged to someone else. She left me a letter this morning, said he was better than me in every way. She said he'd be the father of her child. Harris didn't flinch. If he was surprised, he didn't show it. His face was a mask of practiced calm. I see. And this letter, do you still have it? I nodded, feeling a wave of nausea roll through me. Yes, and there's a flash drive too. She left it with a bag of her things. I didn't have a chance to look at it before you called. Harris leaned forward, his eyes narrowing slightly. A flash drive? Yes, I replied, swallowing hard. I don't know what's on it. I didn't have the nerve to check. He nodded, considering this for a moment. We'll need to see that, he said. It could be important. But for now, I need you to tell me everything you know about this man, Eric Lambert. Any details you can remember, anything at all. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to think through the anger and betrayal clouding my mind. I don't know much, I admitted. She told me he was a client, a new one. I think they met a few months ago. She didn't talk about him much, but I noticed the way she lit up when his name came up, the way she got defensive if I asked too many questions. Harris jotted down notes, his expression never wavering. Did you ever meet him? Once, I said, trying to remember. At a gallery opening. He seemed charming, confident, too confident if you ask me. He knew how to work a room, how to make people like him. I didn't think much of it at the time, but now everything felt like a glaring neon sign that had been there all along, but I'd been too blind to see it. Harris put down his pen and leaned back in his chair. Mark, I know this is a lot to process, but I need you to be honest with me. Do you think your wife could be in danger? Or do you think maybe she orchestrated this? I shook my head, my mind racing through 1,000 possibilities. I don't know. I don't know what to think. She's not the woman I thought I married. That much I know. But orchestrate this? I mean, What would she have to gain? Harris nodded slowly, as if considering his next move. That's what we need to find out. For now, I'm going to have an officer go with you to your house. We need that flash drive. I agreed, still numb, still trying to process everything. The officer assigned to me was young, probably fresh out of the academy, and he tried to make small talk on the drive back to my house. But I wasn't in the mood. I was barely listening, my mind fixated on what could possibly be on that flash drive. What more could she have done to humiliate me, to tear my life apart? We pulled up to my house, and as I stepped out, I realized my hands were trembling. I fumbled with my keys, trying to steady myself, trying to focus. The officer waited by the door, a silent sentinel as I finally got the door open. Inside, everything was as I had left it. The letter, the laundry bag, the flash drive, all waiting like a ticking time bomb in my kitchen. I pointed to the counter. There, that's it. The officer nodded, taking the flash drive and sealing it in an evidence bag. We'll get this to the tech guys, he said. Might take a little while, but we'll see what we can find. I nodded absently, still staring at the place where the flash drive had been, like it might somehow offer me answers if I just looked hard enough. Do you think she's dead? I asked quietly, not sure if I even wanted the answer. The officer didn't respond immediately. We don't know yet, Mr. Tanner. We're doing everything we can to find out. After he left, the silence of the house closed in around me, heavy and suffocating. I walked back to the kitchen, my eyes falling on the bag of laundry she'd left behind. It felt like some kind of twisted joke, a reminder of everything mundane and ordinary that had been shattered in an instant. I kicked it over, watching as a few pieces of clothing spilled out onto the floor. And then I saw it. A black lace bra, something I had never seen her wear for me. It was delicate, almost too pretty, too perfect. I knew instantly that it wasn't meant for me. I felt something snap. Inside me, a deep, visceral rage that started to boil over. I grabbed the bag, threw it across the room, my breathing coming in heavy gasps. I felt the tears sting my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. I wouldn't give her that satisfaction. I slumped down against the wall, feeling utterly drained, my mind still reeling. And that's when I remembered. The flash drive. I didn't need the police to tell me what was on it. I could find out myself. I still had the copy on my computer, the one I had made in case it was something I needed to confront her with. I took a deep breath, pushing myself up, heading for my study. It was time to see what secrets she had left behind. Secrets that would change everything. The study was the only room in the house that felt like mine. The heavy oak desk, the shelves filled with books I loved but never had the time to read, the faint scent of coffee lingering in the air. It was my refuge, my escape from everything outside those four walls. I closed the door behind me, as if somehow shutting out the world might make what I was about to do feel less daunting. I sat down at my desk, staring at the computer screen as it hummed to life. My hands hovered over the keyboard, hesitant, trembling. Did I really want to do this? Did I really want to see whatever Rachel had felt was important enough to put on that flash drive, whatever she believed would show me why Eric was better than me? The anger flared up again, hot and sharp. Of course I wanted to know. I had to know. I couldn't live in this state of confusion, of not knowing whether I'd been a fool, or worse, a willing participant in my own humiliation. I navigated to the folder where I had saved the contents of the flash drive, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. There were several files. Videos, mostly, each labeled with a date and time. The earliest was from about 6 months ago. The most recent, just a week before the cruise. I clicked on the first one, the screen flickering as the video loaded. Rachel's face appeared. She was smiling, that smile I had once thought was only for me. But now, it was for someone else. She was in a hotel room, I realized, her back to a bed with crisp white sheets. And then the camera panned, and there he was, Eric, shirtless, muscular, his face wearing the same arrogant smile I had seen in the photos at the station. "Are you sure he won't find out?" Eric asked, his voice smooth, almost playful. I felt a wave of nausea at the sound of it. Rachel laughed, a light, carefree sound I hadn't heard in months. "Mark? He wouldn't suspect a thing. He's too busy with work, and besides, he trusts me completely." I felt my hands curl into fists, my nails digging into my palms. I had trusted her, completely. Every word, every late night, every excuse. I watched, numb, as the video continued, the two of them moving closer, their bodies entwining, the clothes coming off in a casual, intimate way that made my skin crawl. I should have turned it off. I should have looked away, but I couldn't. It was like watching a car crash, horrifying but impossible to ignore. Their bodies moved together with a familiarity that I hadn't felt with Rachel in a long time. I felt a hot tear slide down my cheek, and I wiped it away, angry at myself for still feeling anything for her. I kept watching, kept torturing myself, forcing myself to see every second of it. It was only a few minutes long, but it felt like hours, each frame searing itself into my brain. When it ended, I sat back, feeling like I had been punched in the gut. I could barely breathe, my chest tight, my mind reeling with 1,000 thoughts. I hated her. I hated him. But most of all, I hated myself for not seeing it sooner. I clicked on the next video and the next, each one more explicit, more damning than the last. Different locations, different dates, a hotel room, a parked car, even the office where Rachel worked. No place was sacred. Each one showed a different side of Rachel, a side I had never seen, a side she had reserved only for him. I watched them all, every single one, until the last video began to play. This one was different. The setting was dark, the camera shakier, the sound muffled. I recognized the backdrop immediately, our bedroom. A cold, sick feeling settled in my stomach. They had been here, in our bed, the bed I had shared with Rachel for years, the bed where we had once made love, whispered secrets, planned our future. Rachel was speaking, her voice low, urgent. "You're sure he's at work?" Eric chuckled. "He's always at work. You worry too much, babe." They kissed, and then the sound of them laughing, falling onto the bed, the camera tilted awkwardly as it continued to record. I felt a scream building in my throat, a primal, furious sound that I struggled to keep inside. My hands shook, my knuckles white as I gripped the edge of the desk. And then, something caught my eye, a glint of silver on the nightstand. My silver watch, the one I had been looking for a week ago, the one I had thought I'd misplaced. He had been in my home, in my bedroom with my wife, wearing my things, laughing in my face. I couldn't take it anymore. I slammed my hand down on the desk, the sound echoing through the empty house, my chest heaving with rage and pain. How could she? How could she do this to me, to us, to everything we had built together? I turned off the computer, breathing heavily, my mind racing. I needed air. I needed to get out of there, away from the ghosts of their betrayal that now haunted every corner of my home. I grabbed my keys and stormed out of the house, slamming the door behind me. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I needed to move, to do something, anything. I found myself in the car, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. The anger burned in me, white-hot and consuming. And I knew then that I couldn't just let this go. She had left me with a letter, a flash drive, and a bag of dirty laundry. She had flaunted her betrayal, shoved it in my face, and dared me to react. Well, I was going to react, and it was going to be ruthless. I drove for hours, the city lights blurring past me as I sped through the streets. I had no destination in mind. I just needed to move, to feel the rush of the wind through the open window, to hear the roar of the engine over the deafening roar in my head. Rachel's words, her laughter, that smug look on Eric's face. They played on a loop in my mind, like a broken record I couldn't shut off. Eventually, I found myself on a deserted stretch of highway, the city fading behind me, replaced by the emptiness of the open road. I felt a strange kind of calm settle over me, the kind that comes after a storm. The rage was still there, simmering beneath the surface, but it was now tempered by a cold, calculating clarity. I knew I had to make a plan. I couldn't just lash out blindly, couldn't let my anger drive me to do something stupid. I needed to be smart about this. I needed to think like her, like Rachel. She had been cunning, clever, ruthless in her betrayal. I would have to be the same in my revenge. I pulled over to the side of the road, the car idling as I sat there, staring out into the darkness. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to focus, to think. I couldn't let her win. I couldn't let her destroy me. If she wanted a game, I would give her one. But I would play by my own rules. First, I needed to find out more about Eric. Who was he really? Where did he come from? What did he do when he wasn't screwing my wife in my bed? I realized I didn't know nearly enough about the man who had stolen Rachel from me, and I needed to know everything if I was going to take him down. I remembered seeing his name pop up a few times in Rachel's emails, the ones she'd left open on our shared laptop by accident. I had only glanced at them, trusting her, not wanting to invade her privacy. But now I realized that I should have been more vigilant. I should have known that her secrecy was a sign of something more sinister. I took out my phone and did a quick search for Eric Lambert. There were a lot of Eric Lamberts in the world, but I was looking for a specific one, a wealthy, arrogant man who had somehow convinced my wife that he was better than me in every way. I scrolled through the results, looking for anything that might connect to Rachel. And then I found it. An article in a business magazine. Eric Lambert, venture capitalist, known for his aggressive investment strategies and his ability to turn failing businesses into gold mines. He was featured in an interview, and there, staring back at me from the screen, was that same smug smile I had seen in the videos. The caption read, "Eric Lambert, the man who never loses." Well, I thought, he's about to lose everything. I took down the address of his office, a sleek high-rise downtown, and made a mental note to pay him a visit soon. But first, I needed to know more about what had happened on that cruise. Why had Rachel disappeared? Why was there blood in her cabin? And where the hell were they now? I dialed the number for the cruise line, masking my voice to sound official, pretending to be a concerned family member. I told them I had been contacted by the police and needed any information they could provide about Rachel Tanner and Eric Lambert's stay on their ship. To my surprise, the woman on the other end was cooperative, sympathetic even. "Yes, Mr. Tanner, I understand," she said, her voice tinged with concern. "I can tell you that they checked in together, but they were reported missing after the final head count. We found some personal belongings in their cabin, but the cabin was in disarray, and there were signs of a struggle." "What kind of signs?" I pressed. She hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. "Blood," she said finally. "Quite a bit of it on the bed and the floor. We've turned everything over to the authorities. I'm really sorry, sir." I thanked her and hung up, my mind racing again. So it was true. There had been a struggle. But whose blood was it? Was it Rachel's? Or was it Eric's? A flicker of hope ignited in my chest. Maybe she had tried to fight him off. Maybe this wasn't as cut and dry as it seemed. Or maybe it was exactly what it seemed. A nightmare without end. I decided to return home, knowing I had to face what was on that flash drive again. Maybe there was something I missed, some clue, some detail that would tell me where to start looking. As I pulled into my driveway, I noticed the house was dark, the windows like blank, accusing eyes. I had always thought of it as a place of safety, of love. Now it was just a hollow shell, like me. Inside, I went straight to the kitchen, grabbing a bottle of whiskey from the cabinet, needing something to dull the edges of the rage that was creeping back in. I took a long swig, letting the burn wash over me, and headed back to the study. The flash drive was still in my pocket, a heavy weight against my side. I plugged it in, the files flashing up on the screen again, taunting me with their cold, digital indifference. I clicked through them again, watching for anything I might have missed, anything that could give me a clue about where they had gone or what had really happened. And then I saw it, a file I hadn't noticed before. It was buried deep in the folder, labeled simply, Final Message. My heart pounded as I clicked on it. The screen went black for a moment, and then Rachel's face appeared again, her expression serious, her eyes fixed on the camera. She looked different this time, almost scared. She took a deep breath, as if steeling herself for what she was about to say. "Mark," she began, her voice shaking slightly. "If you're watching this, then things have gone badly. I know you hate me right now, and you have every right to. But there are things you don't understand. Things I couldn't tell you, because it was too dangerous." She paused, glancing over her shoulder as if she expected someone to appear behind her. "Eric isn't who you think he is. He's dangerous, Mark. Really dangerous. I got caught up in something I didn't fully understand, and now I don't know how to get out. If I don't come back, you need to find out the truth. It's not just about us anymore. It's about so much more." She looked directly into the camera, her eyes pleading. "Please, Mark, don't let him win. Find out what he's hiding. You're the only one who can." The screen went black, and I sat there, stunned, my mind spinning with questions. What the hell had she gotten herself into? What did she mean, dangerous? And what the hell was Eric hiding? I knew then that this was far from over. Whatever had started as a simple betrayal had now twisted into something darker, something far more complicated than I had imagined. And if Rachel was right, if Eric really was dangerous, then I was about to plunge headfirst into a world I wasn't prepared for. But I didn't care. I would find out the truth, no matter what it took. And when I did, I would make them both pay. Rachel's final message echoed in my head like a drumbeat, each word ringing with a mix of fear and urgency. I stared at the blank screen, feeling the weight of her warning settling on my shoulders. Dangerous. What did she mean by that? Dangerous. How? And what could Eric possibly be hiding that she felt I was the only one who could uncover it? I took another swig from the whiskey bottle, trying to steady my nerves, to think clearly. If Rachel was telling the truth, then I had to assume Eric was more than just a smug, arrogant homewrecker. Maybe he had manipulated her, coerced her into this mess. But why? What was his endgame? And what the hell had Rachel gotten herself into? I knew I couldn't just sit here wallowing in anger and confusion. I had to take action, to start digging. The first thing I needed was information, real information, not just the snippets and suspicions I had so far. I had to know who Eric Lambert truly was, beyond the polished persona he presented to the world. I opened my laptop again and started searching, going deeper than before, beyond the superficial articles and profiles. I dug into public records, news reports, anything that might shed light on his past. I found mentions of business deals, some of them controversial, but nothing that screamed dangerous. I kept going, deeper into the shadows of the internet, where the more hidden truths often lurked. And that's when I found it. A name connected to his. Nicholas Brandt. The name was buried in an old court document, a lawsuit involving one of Eric's former business partners who had disappeared under mysterious circumstances. Brandt was listed as a witness, but something about it didn't sit right with me. Why would a witness's name appear in multiple reports about shady dealings? I searched for Nicholas Brandt, finding an old photo of a man with a rugged face, cold eyes, and a faint, almost mocking smile. He looked like trouble, the kind of trouble you don't want to find yourself tangled up with. The more I read, the more I realized this man had a history. Accusations of fraud, extortion, a few rumored ties to organized crime. No convictions, though, no arrests, just whispers. I felt a shiver run down my spine. If Eric was mixed up with this guy, then Rachel's warning started to make a lot more sense. And if Rachel had gotten caught up in their schemes, she might have been in way over her head. I had to find this Brandt. If he was connected to Eric, he might know something. I wasn't sure how I was going to do it, but I knew I needed to start somewhere. I took another sip of whiskey, feeling the burn down my throat. I had an idea. I knew a guy, a former colleague of mine, Peter. He had left the software world years ago to work in cybersecurity, and he was good. Very good. The kind of guy who could find out things most people wanted to keep hidden. I hadn't spoken to him in years, but desperate times called for desperate measures. I picked up my phone and dialed his number, hoping it hadn't changed. It rang twice before he answered, his voice as dry and sarcastic as I remembered. Mark Tanner. Been a long time. To what do I owe this unexpected pleasure? Peter, I need your help, I said, getting straight to the point. I need to find someone who doesn't want to be found. There was a pause, and I could almost hear the gears turning in his head. You're not in trouble, are you? Not yet, I replied, but someone I care about might be. It's complicated. Complicated is what I do best, he said, a hint of a grin in his voice. Give me a name. Nicholas Brandt, I said. He's connected to a guy named Eric Lambert. I need to know everything there is to know about both of them. Peter let out a low whistle. Lambert, huh? I've heard of him. Not a guy you want to be tangled up with. Give me a couple of hours, maybe less. I'll see what I can dig up. Thanks, Peter. I owe you one, I said. You owe me more than one, he laughed, and then the line went dead. I sat back, my mind buzzing with 100 different possibilities. I knew I couldn't just wait around for Peter to call me back. I needed to keep moving, to stay ahead of whatever game Rachel and Eric had been playing. I decided to start with the only concrete lead I had, Eric's office. I grabbed my jacket and headed out, the cold night air hitting me like a slap in the face. I drove downtown, navigating through the maze of city streets until I reached the high-rise where Eric's office was located. It was late, well past business hours, but I had a feeling someone would still be there. Men like Eric didn't keep regular hours. Their lives were their work, and their work was their life. I parked across the street and watched for a few minutes, trying to get a sense of the place. The lights were still on in a few of the offices, a couple of shadows moving inside. I couldn't see much from where I was, but I didn't plan to stay on the outside for long. I crossed the street and entered the lobby, my shoes clicking on the marble floor. The security guard at the desk looked up, bored and indifferent. Can I help you? He asked. I nodded, giving him my most confident smile. Yeah, I'm here to see Eric Lambert. I know it's late, but he asked me to drop something off. The guard frowned, clearly skeptical. Lambert? I haven't seen him come in today. He told me he'd be working late, I replied, keeping my voice casual. I'm just dropping off a file he needed for a meeting tomorrow. The guard hesitated, then shrugged. All right, go on up. But if anyone asks, you didn't get this from me. I thanked him and headed to the elevator, my heart racing as I pressed the button for the 18th floor. The ride up felt like an eternity, my mind racing with questions and doubts. What was I doing here? What was I hoping to find? The elevator doors opened with a soft ding, and I stepped out into a darkened hallway. Most of the offices were closed, the lights off, but there was a faint glow coming from the end of the hall. I moved quietly, my footsteps soft on the carpet as I approached the source of the light. Eric's office door was slightly ajar, the light spilling out into the hallway. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what I might find, and pushed the door open. The office was empty, but I could tell someone had been here recently. Papers were strewn across the desk, a laptop sat open, the screen still glowing. I walked over, glancing at the documents, my eyes catching a name, Nicholas Brandt. I picked up the papers, scanning them quickly. They were financial reports, transfers, and something else. Something that looked like a plan. A plan for something big. Something illegal. Before I could piece it all together, I heard footsteps in the hallway behind me, moving quickly. I turned, my heart hammering in my chest as a figure appeared in the doorway. "Who the hell are you?" the man demanded, his voice sharp and angry. I recognized him instantly from the photo I'd seen earlier. Nicholas Brandt. I stood there, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst from my chest. Nicholas Brandt filled the doorway, his frame blocking my only exit. He had the look of a man who'd been in his fair share of fights. Scars on his knuckles, a rough, weathered face that carried a permanent sneer. His cold, piercing eyes zeroed in on me, and I felt a jolt of fear shoot through my body. "I asked you a question," he said, stepping into the office, his voice low and menacing. "Who the hell are you?" I swallowed, trying to buy myself a few seconds to think. "I'm Mark Tanner," I said, keeping my tone steady. "I'm looking for Eric." He cocked his head slightly, a cruel smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Looking for Eric? In the middle of the night? In his private office? You think I'm an idiot?" I glanced around the room, noting the door still open behind him, the narrow window to my right. There wasn't much of a chance to run. "Listen, I just wanted to talk to him. I think he might be involved in something that concerns me." Brandt laughed, a harsh, mirthless sound. "Oh, he's involved, all right. And now you are too. You shouldn't have come here, Tanner. You're out of your league." I felt a flicker of defiance rise up in me, pushing back against the fear. Maybe, but I'm here now. So why don't you tell me what the hell is going on? Brandt's smile vanished, replaced by a hard, calculating look. He took a step closer, and I could see the glint of something metallic in his hand. A gun, small and sleek, barely visible in the dim light. My breath caught in my throat. "Last chance, Tanner," he said quietly, almost conversationally. "Tell me what you know, and maybe I'll let you walk out of here in one piece." I took a deep breath, my mind racing. I needed to play this carefully, to get him to talk without giving away too much. "I know Rachel," I said. "I know she was with Eric, and I know they're both missing. And I know there was blood, a lot of it." Brandt's expression flickered, a momentary crack in his composure. "So, you're the husband," he said, as if confirming a suspicion. "The poor bastard she left behind. I guess that makes you the last person to see her alive, huh?" The way he said alive made my skin crawl. "What are you talking about?" I demanded, my voice rising despite my best efforts to stay calm. "What did you do to her?" He chuckled again, shaking his head. "Me? I didn't do anything. Your wife got herself into a mess, and now it looks like you're diving in head first after her. Do you even know what she was mixed up in?" "No," I replied, my voice tight with anger. "But you're going to tell me." Brandt leaned back against the doorframe, crossing his arms, the gun still visible in his hand. "All right, Tanner, I'll tell you this much. Rachel wasn't the innocent little wife you think she was. She was playing a game, a dangerous game, and she was in way over her head. Eric thought he could use her, turn her against you, get what he wanted. But things didn't go as planned." I felt my mouth go dry, my heart beating faster. "What do you mean, didn't go as planned?" Brandt's eyes darkened. "Rachel got cold feet. She started asking questions, digging where she shouldn't have. She found out some things she wasn't supposed to know, and that made her a liability." "A liability?" I repeated, the word feeling like ice on my tongue. He nodded. "That's right. And in our line of work, liabilities don't last long." I felt the floor sway beneath me. "Where is she?" I asked, my voice barely more than a whisper. Brandt shrugged, his expression indifferent. "Couldn't say. Last I saw, she was with Eric, and they were having a disagreement." "Disagreement?" I spat, feeling the anger flare up again. "You mean he was threatening her?" He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Call it what you want, Tanner. All I know is, if she's smart, she's gone. If she's not, well, that's not my problem. I clenched my fists, trying to keep my cool. And what about Eric? I pressed. Where is he now? Brandt's smile widened, and I saw a flash of something. Amusement, maybe, or something darker. You want to find Eric? Be my guest. But you won't like what you find. I took a step forward, ignoring the gun in his hand, ignoring the warning bells screaming in my head. Tell me where he is. Brandt laughed again, a low, mocking sound. You've got guts, I'll give you that. But you're not going to scare me into talking, Tanner. You're not the first desperate husband I've dealt with, and you sure as hell won't be the last. I knew then that I wasn't going to get anything more out of him, at least not here, not now, but I had learned enough. To know that whatever Rachel had stumbled into, it was far more dangerous than I had realized. I took a step back, trying to keep my voice steady. Fine, I said. I'll find him myself. Brandt's smile faded. Good luck with that, he sneered. And when you do, tell him I said hello. I turned and walked out of the office, my heart racing, my mind spinning. I had no idea where to go next, but I knew I couldn't stop. Rachel's final message, her plea for help, echoed in my mind. She had trusted me to find the truth, to uncover what Eric was hiding. And now, I was more determined than ever to do just that. But first, I needed to disappear. If Brandt had warned me once, he wouldn't hesitate to finish what he started if he saw me again. I made my way back to the car, slipping into the driver's seat, my hands trembling as I gripped the steering wheel. I needed to think, to plan my next move carefully. I glanced in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see Brandt's shadow looming behind me, but the street was empty, the city quiet in the late-night darkness. I took a deep breath, started the engine, and drove away, knowing that this was just the beginning, and that the only way out was through the darkness, deeper into the secrets, deeper into the danger that lay ahead. The city seemed to press in around me as I drove toward the docks, the headlights cutting through the thick fog that had settled over the streets like a shroud. The farther I went, the darker the city became, the streetlights more sparse, the buildings more derelict. This was where the lost and the broken came to disappear, where secrets were buried and forgotten. I parked a few blocks away from the warehouse Peter had found. I knew I was walking into something dangerous, something that could end me. But I didn't care. I was beyond fear now, driven by a single, all-consuming purpose: finding Rachel, my wife, the woman who had betrayed me, and yet, despite it all, I couldn't let her go. Not like this. I made my way through the shadows, moving quickly but quietly, my senses on high alert. The warehouse loomed ahead, an enormous, rusted monument to some forgotten era. The dim glow of a few lights inside was the only sign that it wasn't entirely abandoned. I edged closer, my heart pounding in my chest, the cold night air stinging my face. I reached the side of the building, finding a narrow door. It was partially open, the lock broken. I took a deep breath and pushed it wider, slipping inside. The warehouse was vast, dark, and filled with old crates and machinery, the smell of salt water and oil thick in the air. I moved carefully, staying low, my footsteps barely making a sound on the cracked concrete floor. I heard a muffled noise from the far end of the building, a soft cry, followed by a shuffling sound. I crept closer, moving from shadow to shadow, my pulse racing. And then I saw her. Rachel was tied to a chair, a bag over her head, her body slumped forward. I felt a surge of relief and dread at the same time. She was alive, but for how much longer? I moved quickly, my hands trembling as I pulled the bag off her head. Her face was bruised, her eyes swollen, but she was conscious, her gaze darting around in confusion, until it landed on me. "Mark," she whispered, her voice weak, her lips cracked. You shouldn't be here." "Quiet," I hissed, glancing over my shoulder. "I'm getting you out of here. I know everything. About Eric, about what you found out. We need to go, now." Her eyes filled with tears, and she shook her head slowly, almost in resignation. "Mark, no. You don't understand. There's more." Before she could finish, I heard a click, the unmistakable sound of a gun being cocked. I froze, my blood turning to ice. "Step away from her," a voice commanded, calm and cold. I turned slowly and saw Eric Lambert standing in the shadows, a gun aimed directly at my head. His expression was grim, almost disappointed. "Looks like you found us," he said with a dark smile. "But you're too late, Mark. This is where your little rescue mission ends." My mind raced, weighing my options, but there was no cover, no escape. "Eric, listen," I began, trying to sound calm. "Whatever this is, we can work something out. Just let her go." Eric's smile widened, but his eyes remained cold. "Let her go? You really think that's going to happen? She betrayed me, Mark. She was supposed to help me, but she turned on me, started snooping around, asking questions she shouldn't have. She's become a liability." I glanced at Rachel, seeing the fear in her eyes. "Please," I said, my voice low and steady. "Just let her go. She didn't know what she was getting into. You don't have to do this." Eric shook his head slowly. "Oh, but I do. You see, there's too much at stake here. You have no idea what she's cost me." Before I could say anything else, Rachel's face hardened. She looked at me with an intensity I hadn't seen before. "Mark," she whispered, urgently, "I'm so sorry, for everything, but you have to know, there's something I didn't tell you." Suddenly there was a loud noise, a gunshot, echoing through the warehouse. I flinched, expecting pain, but it wasn't aimed at me. Rachel cried out, her body jerking as the bullet hit her in the shoulder. Blood began to spread across her shirt, and she gasped, her eyes wide with shock. "No!" I shouted, stepping forward, but Eric raised the gun again, pointing it back at me. "Stay where you are," he warned, his voice steely. "Or the next one goes in her head." Rachel's breathing was ragged, her face pale, but she managed to speak, her words coming out in desperate gasps. "Mark, listen to me. Eric, he's not just... Her voice faltered, and she coughed, blood staining her lips. Eric stepped closer, his gun trained on me. "She's been trying to double-cross me, working with someone else behind my back. Thought she could outsmart me." He sneered, glancing at Rachel with disdain. Turns out, she wasn't as clever as she thought. I felt the room spin, the reality of what he was saying hitting me like a ton of bricks. "What are you talking about?" I demanded, trying to keep my voice steady. Eric laughed, a cruel, mocking sound. "She was planning to run, Mark. With my money, with everything. She was going to leave us both behind. You think she wanted to come back to you? She was ready to disappear, to start a new life without either of us?" I looked at Rachel, hoping for some denial, some sign that he was lying, but she didn't say anything. Her eyes were full of regret, but there was no denial, just a deep, painful truth. "Is it true?" I whispered, my heart breaking all over again. "Were you going to leave me?" Rachel nodded slowly, tears streaming down her face. I was scared, Mark. I wanted out. I didn't know who to trust anymore. I thought if I could just get away." Eric interrupted with a snarl. "Too bad for her, I found out. And now you both pay the price." He raised the gun again, aiming it at Rachel. I felt a surge of adrenaline, a desperate need to act. I lunged forward, grabbing the nearest object, a rusted metal rod, and swung it at Eric with all my strength. The impact knocked him back, and the gun flew from his hand, clattering to the ground. Rachel screamed, and I dove for the gun, but Eric recovered quickly, tackling me to the ground. We struggled, rolling across the cold concrete floor, fists flying, teeth clenched. He was strong, stronger than I expected, and he landed a hard punch to my side, knocking the wind out of me. I saw stars, my vision blurring, but I couldn't give up. I had to fight, for Rachel, for myself. I grabbed the rod again and swung it at his head, connecting with a sickening crack. He fell back, dazed, giving me just enough time to reach for the gun. I grabbed it and aimed at him, my hands shaking, my finger on the trigger. "Don't move," I warned, my voice hoarse. Eric stared at me, blood trickling from his forehead, but he still managed a smile. "You don't have the guts," he taunted. I hesitated, and in that split second, he lunged at me again. I fired, the sound deafening in the enclosed space. Eric stopped, his eyes wide with shock, his hands clutching his chest where the bullet had struck. He staggered back, collapsing against the wall, his breath rattling in his throat. I stood there, panting, my hands trembling. Eric was dying, but as he slid down the wall, he laughed, a horrible, wet sound. "You think this is over?" he gasped. "You don't even know. You don't know?" And then he was gone, his eyes staring blankly at nothing. I turned to Rachel, rushing to her side. Her face was pale, her breathing shallow, but she was alive. "We need to get you out of here," I said urgently. "Come on." She nodded, her eyes filled with pain and fear. "Mark, I'm so sorry. Save it," I said, my voice harder than I intended. "Just stay with me." I helped her up, her body weak against mine. We stumbled toward the door, the cold night air hitting us like a slap. I didn't know what came next. I didn't know if we could ever go back to the way things were. But I knew one thing. This nightmare was far from over. And as we moved into the darkness, I couldn't help but feel that we were only just beginning to uncover the true depth of the abyss we had fallen into.